If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Be a part of a new coalition with Jake Feinberg. The second half of his show starts right now.
Welcome, everybody, to the Jake Feinberg Show. And as I continue my path towards interviewing my jazz heroes and actually people that are intellectual titans as well and leaders in our society, my guest today is saxophonist Gary Bartz. Gary grew up in Baltimore, one of the great old-time jazz cities, and spent a great deal of time in his dad's jazz lounge, soaking up all the legends that came through. He's played with Art Blakey, Miles Davis, and Max Roach. To this day, he continues to collaborate spiritually and musically with McCoy Tyner. He put out a slew of albums on the Milestone label and later its sister label, the Prestige. The albums were all part spirit, part soul, and part body politic. And today he remains incredibly active, teaching music at Oberlin College in Ohio and playing all over the world. Gary Bartz, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello.
Yes, Gary, how are you?
Okay.
Hey, we're breaking in a new board op here, so I know you can appreciate that. Back from your days in Baltimore, I appreciate it. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I wanted to. Did you hear my introduction to you?
I did.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's an honor to have you on the program, my friend. I wanted to start by having you talk about what you're doing right now as far as teaching is concerned, and you know, how much of the time do you spend, I guess my question is this, how do you develop or how do you get younger students to develop their own sound?
Well, I try to show them the way my generation and almost every generation up until the last maybe 20 years have learned music. But before I even go there, you know, because you use that word jazz, and jazz is a word that's very confining, and that's why most musicians do not use labels for their music, because it has no other label other than it's music. You know, I mean, water is water, air is air.
Yes.
You can segment it and segregate it if you want to, but it still ends up being air. Same thing with music. It always ends up being music. I don't care. Just like Duke Ellington said, it's two types if you want to divide it, good and bad, and that's subjective. But so
no, I you know, for my audience's sake, when Gary and I talked previously, he made it very clear to me he plays music, not jazz. So, you know, if I use any type of segregated language, please feel free to step in at all costs. So continue.
Well, what it does, it reveals me something about the person that uses that word. You know, either they're uneducated to what music is, or they are just brainwashed and they just go, or they understand it, but they call it that anyway. You know, it couldn't be a lot of reasons, you know. But I just saw an interview on YouTube, Brian Gumbo interview with Miles, and the same thing. You know, I mean, I worked with, you know, Max. Max would literally go to blows for people accusing him of playing jazz, because that's demeaning, you know. I mean, we play music. What would you, Stravinsky, you know, like I say, did he play Class? You know, Ravel, what did they play? You don't name it. It's just music. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
You know, I feel like you don't. I totally understand the sort of you don't want it to be an exclusive. You don't want.
But I don't want to be put in a box.
Exactly.
Jazz is a box, and it's confining. And so that whenever I would do things that the so-called jazz purists didn't like, you know, I was selling out, or I was doing this, or I was playing music all the time. Whatever I do, I'm going to play music, because that's what I am. I'm a musician. Same problem we had with Miles. People said he's selling out, he's doing this. But look, I trusted Miles's musicality and his musical intellect, that I knew whatever it was he was doing had validity. So I didn't just, scoff at it. I checked it out, and I saw what he was doing, He was being an artist, like he was, and a very intelligent artist, and most artists are usually ahead of the public, but that's because that's what we study. We're studying it, where the audience just hears the end result. They don't hear all of the years to get to a certain song or to get to play a certain way. They don't see all those years, hours and hours traveling. They don't see all of that.
I wanted to ask you,
result, which is good, but then to just say, "Oh, that's jazz,"
mm-hmm.
I'd much rather just say it's music, because that's what it is.
Well,
but,
I wanted to ask.
I have this discussion all the time because most people don't understand it. I really don't see it. I don't see it.
No, and that's just coming from somebody. I mean, I think it has something to do with sort of the media construct that we have developed. And you go on, for instance, if I'm looking for Gary Bartz, a couple of your albums from the late '60s.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say I'm looking for Home or Libra, and I go on to a website that sells records.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to say, they're going to rave about the album, but the word jazz is going to be used 5 or 6 times in that description.
Right.
So through the medium that I'm looking for this stuff, it goes into your head and you start to learn this. You become indoctrinated in it.
Right, it does. And I understand why it happened. It happened initially because if you go into a record store and there were different types, it made it easier to find certain things.
Exactly.
But in this music, the more modern music, they weren't in the stores mostly anyway. so it didn't matter, that could be construed as something else. We won't go there.
This makes for compelling radio. I did want to say, because I captured something from you, some audio that I was watching that I was fascinated about, and you were sort of pontificating, or you just were analyzing sort of the students that you see in your classes now, and I thought it was just great. You talked about really the generation, or even the players just a little bit before your time as well. They didn't have music schools to go to. They couldn't go and learn a certain style. And so they had to develop their own style. And like you said, it took hours, and it took a lot of traveling, and it just took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And but hence you had yourself, and you had Woody Shaw, and you had Miles, and you had all sorts of different players, just to name a couple, that developed their own sound. But now you say, because there's all this stuff to comp, it makes people, technically they can read music very well, they're very proficient, but yet you say they sound like certain people. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Well, when you're being taught by the same teacher, you seem to, all of the students have a certain, you can tell. Like, just for instance, like, you can tell the saxophonists that love Charlie Parker. And they might not even had one-on-one with Charlie Parker, but just listening to him, he taught them. And so then they end up sounding like him. Well, when you take that into the schools and you have a saxophone teacher teaching students, you can fall prey to having everyone have a similar, be similar. You have to watch it because everyone's individual, and you have to approach it like that. You can't approach it like most educational curriculums. They have a curriculum, and this is the way you teach it. So fortunately, a lot of schools that do teach this music, they are not that strict about the curriculum. They allow the teachers more leeway. But a lot of schools, I can tell when guys come from certain schools, I won't mention any names.
So,
but I can tell because they have this similar, which is not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. And none of this is bad. As long as you're learning music, that's a good thing. What happens is that, okay, you learn it, now you have to find your sound. You know, what we did, we were searching, we were doing all of that at the same time. We were looking for a sound while we were learning music, rather than learning music and then finding a sound.
You did, though, and we are jumping around here, and we're joined by Gary Bartz. This has been an electrifying interview already, and I appreciate you dealing with us through those early technical problems. But, you know, you grew up in your dad's nightclub, so you had all this hands-on experience, but then...
Well, no, I didn't grow up in there. He didn't... I was already living in New York when he bought the club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had been at Juilliard for, I think, 2 years I had been there. Because I started in Juilliard in 58, 59, and he bought the club in 60. So I was still living in New York. He had the nightclub from 1960 to 1965.
Yeah, it talks...
the North End Lounge in Baltimore, Maryland, located on North and Gay Street in East Baltimore. But
did you like? Can you describe there was essentially the curriculum was being made on the fly when you were at Juilliard? Is that fair to say? It was really one of the first pilot programs.
No, it was a European classical curriculum.
Really?
I was not even a sax major. I was a composition major because I studied with Joe Allard, who was the principal saxophonist in the Radio City Music, Orchestra, the first saxophonist. He taught great saxophonist, great musician, but he taught clarinet. A clarinet was an instrument that you could take. You couldn't take saxophone.
Why not?
Well, because they didn't recognize it as an orchestral instrument.
Wow. So it was just too avant-garde for the.
Well, there was not a lot of material written because the saxophone is a newer instrument. It's only a little over 100 years old. All the other instruments have hundreds and hundreds of years, of music and technical literature. But the saxophone is not. It's fairly new. So they didn't feel a lot of schools were like that. Most of them were like, I had a choice to go to Manhattan, which I should have, but Juilliard had the bigger name.
Exactly.
So I went there. I mean, not that I learned things there, but I know Max Roach, he went to Manhattan. Donald Byrd went to Manhattan. A lot of guys went to Manhattan. And it's funny now, Manhattan is where Juilliard used to be. When I went to Juilliard, is now Manhattan has taken over that building. And Juilliard moved down to Lincoln Center.
So take us through, for the audience's sake. The saxophone didn't have like the curriculum or the years per se. It didn't have the longevity as some of the other instruments did. Who were some of maybe your professors, or at least people in the music community, people like Max Roach that kind of that you gravitated to the saxophone and started playing music with it?
Well, I heard these records at my grandmother's house where my uncle lived, my father's youngest brother, Leon, and he loved this music, and he would go to New York and bring back the latest records and stories of where he went to Birdland and saw Dizzy Gillespie telling stories, and I'd listen to these music. I started listening to these records when I was about 6 years old, and I stumbled across a Charlie Parker record, and as a 6-year-old, not knowing anything about music or whatever, I made a decision that I wanted to do this, whatever that was, that this person, I didn't know, it could have been a man, could have been anyone. I wanted to do whatever he was doing, he or she was doing. And so I started listening, started begging for, I found out it was a saxophone, and started asking my parents for a saxophone every year around Christmas time or whenever. They would ask, what would you like? It was so finally when I was 11, they finally purchased me, or rented me one, actually. And now it's got to work. But see, I had been listening and studying in my head for 5 years, which is what I say, well, this is what musicians do. You don't need your instrument to practice. You can learn music and work on music without your instrument. So, when I hear guys say, well, I just don't have the time, or, I don't take that, I don't feel sorry for you.
Exactly. You'd be a great teacher for me, constantly lighting a fire under me to just, because I know what you're talking about. It's a level of cognition that you can still learn. You don't need to have the physical instrument in your hand in order to get rhythm or tempo or or dynamic or anything like that.
Or see the scales. What I visualize. I visualize what I'm doing. So I can visualize it if I'm sitting on the subway or if I have the instrument in my hand. Either way, I visualize what it is. So I'll transpose it into another key, because I've already know. Once you know the melody, like I teach, nothing is more important than the melody, and that seems to be what's missing nowadays. I don't hear much melodies. You can change the harmony on songs. You can reharmonize a melody, but you can't change the melody. If you change the melody, it's a new song. And then it has different harmonies that go with it.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, because the melody came first. The melodies came before harmony. Harmony is new. It's more recent than melodies. We didn't have pianos. We didn't have, the ancient musicians. They didn't have all those things, even guitars and things. Initially they was just the voice, or, So they were melodies. They came from melodies, and gradually people started hearing chords and things behind them. But that's newer.
Right.
So melody comes first. The same way ears come first. You can't know you want to be a musician or you like music unless you hear it. So that's first. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, it's from that same audio clip where you talk about these students that you see. Not only is it more of a more comping musically, but there's less listening, and
you don't know how to. Well, their ears are locked.
Their ears are. Can you describe that the best way you can?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll show you how a musician can tell that they have good ears, but their ears are locked. Because when I'm with a student and they're playing something and they play a wrong note, immediately they know it because their ear is saying that's a wrong note.
Mm-hmm.
Now they need to find out why that's a wrong note, because in actuality there are no wrong notes, but they don't understand. They don't have enough knowledge yet to know how to use that note, so it ends up being a wrong note. But it's nothing that they saw on the page, because now they're just playing out of their head. So when they hit wrong notes and they know it, that's their ear. Nothing is more powerful than ear. Nothing.
Yeah, when I think of locked, I think of like unmovable. So, but they recognize that they are playing the wrong note, though. It's not that they're not cognizant.
Right.
It's so, but it's just that they
don't trust it.
They don't trust. And on a we're here with Gary Bartz, and Gary, in a couple minutes we're going to be going to just a little bit of a hard break for my commercials. But when we come back, I do want to talk to you about sociological components of jazz when you were in your formative years, and sort of what I have interpreted as a young adult as a society now that is not comfortable with themselves, insecure with who they are, and how this sort of cross-referencing that to when you were at Juilliard and in your younger 20s, and how really it seemed to me that people were a lot less uptight about how they looked, how they felt, how they dealt with other people. And I look forward to talking to you about a whole lot of things when we come back from the break, okay?
Okay.
All right, Gary. Legendary musician and teacher, Gary Bartz. Gary, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jake.
Gary, I wanted to ask you, we are in such a strange moment in our society now where it almost to me seems as if we're paralyzed and fearful of what we actually have become as a people. And I am not one to say that there wasn't a lot of strife 40 or 50 years ago, but I do see it in music. I see it clearly in our political structure, in the ability to actually compromise and get things done. I see our society is more insecure now than it ever has been, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Oh man!
And go right ahead. Feel free to say whatever you want, because I don't know if you had a chance to. I had Richard Davis on a couple weeks ago, and he was.
I haven't. No, I've been traveling a lot. I plan on listening to him.
Well, you let it go, my friend. Go ahead and give your thoughts.
Yeah. I think as humans, we have, and this is just across this planet, we have yet to become human beings. We're still human animals. And I don't know why. I don't know whether there's a defect. I don't know whether it was bred into us, put into us, whether we developed it, but we're animals. We go crazy, we kill, we do things that animals do. We have a human being, in my estimation, would do none of these things. Human beings would not do that. So that's it in a nutshell for me. That takes care of everything because we're animals.
Yeah. Let me, in the sense that there's a lot of strife and there's poverty and there's rape and there's all sorts of deprivation, everywhere.
Yeah.
I was wondering, was there a period of time that you, maybe when you were a little bit more naive or hopeful that you believed that we were turning a corner in an evolutionary sense, or have we gone backwards?
It seems as if we're going backwards. It seems as if, because there's always been wars where somebody's always killing somebody or trying to, subjugate them under their power, or, it's just as far as history, you just go on and on. I mean, I look at things like, I grew up in a segregated city. Okay, so I saw segregation in its filthiest, like my mother, if she took me, she was very light. She could have passed for white, but so if she took me to the stores, department stores, she couldn't try on clothes. If she went by herself, she could. And I'm not understanding this. As a kid, you don't understand it. These things have long-lasting effects on you.
Absolutely.
We had the black movie, we had the white movies. We had the black swimming pools, we had the white swimming pools. We had the black schools. We had 2 high schools in Baltimore. It used to be the 6th largest city in the United States back in around the 30s or 40s, but because it's a seaport. But it was segregated. It was on the south side in the Civil War. It's right on the Mason-Dixon line, so it could have gone either way. Maryland was used as a free state. They supposedly didn't have slaves, although they did, especially on the eastern shore, where Frederick Douglass came from. That's where he was born.
The great writer, and he actually had the newspaper called the North Star up in Rochester, New York, during the Civil War times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant man.
Yeah, really, really great.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, just to go back to the scenario with your mother, you were darker than her, so then therefore because you were black, she couldn't try on clothes in the department store.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So and the schools were segregated, so you took different buses to school.
Mm-hmm. We had a high school on the east side and one on the west side. And so, but there were positives. There's always positives and negatives to everything. The community was much closer because everybody knew each other because they went to the same schools, their moms and dads and everybody, because you could only go to these schools. So consequently, everybody knew each other and the community was better, which also happened in the music industry. It used to be when we used to travel, we could only stay at certain hotels in a lot of places. And so there were certain hotels where the artists stayed, the musicians, the actors, the dancers, the filmmakers, the whatever. But they were all, the black community, because we couldn't stay anywhere. We couldn't stay downtown at the Hyatts and all those places. We had to stay at the Booker T. Washingtons.
It was probably a better time. It was probably a better time, though, in some ways.
In some ways it was, but it's good to have a choice.
You need to have choice, and you can't be segregated. I mean, I think what I want to talk to you about is to go back to your childhood, and if you can, the long-lasting effects of this sort of racism, the things that you internalized as a young boy that maybe you still haven't come to terms with. Like the department store kind of thing.
I've definitely come to terms with it. I think this country needs to come to terms with it.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it was this country's original sin, which was slavery.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that it's one of these things, if I can use the analogy, where we've dug white Americans, continually through the years we've already dug ourselves a huge hole. We know slavery was a black eye. We feel totally guilty about it. We know that it was completely wrong and not human. We weren't being human beings at all.
Yeah.
And yet, it's one of those situations where the hole is so deep, Gary, that you just keep digging it deeper and deeper. You can't get. There's no way to get out of it.
I think America needs a 12-step program.
Exactly.
SA.
Let's list those off. Where do we start?
RA, Racism Anonymous.
RA, 12-step program by Gary Bartz. I love it. No, I mean but it just speaks to. I mean, this is. I'll tell you this day in this day and age, the kind of fights that we're having at the political level and at the grassroots level. Mm-hmm. These are not things that I want to be trying to decipher or explain to my daughter when she gets to an age where she can understand this stuff. This is embarrassing to me. And just as I know that if I had been around, if I had been your age growing up, I would have been. It would have made me sick to my stomach to see the treatment, the segregation.
Oh yeah.
I have. Part of the show, I mean, because we could spend the whole time talking about Harlem Bush music or Follow the Medicine Man, and but at the same time, I kind of feel that I want to offer a platform to people like yourself to be able to talk about race in America and where we need to go and how we need to evolve, because I don't think we're not going to see it in our lifetimes, but how can we at least start that process to move forward and become more like human beings?
Oh man, I always, and I think we have to put the faith in the young people. We just have to teach our young people, and I think more and more young people do see the folly of racism. But as they get older, I mean, if you can use, it's almost like drugs. If you're a drug addict and you're trying to stop using drugs, and you don't feel well, and you have a meeting to go to, or you have to do something, and you know that all you have to do is get high, and you'll feel better. A lot of times that people fall off the wagon like that,
and they skip the meeting.
They skip the meeting and get high and miss. It's kind of like that with race. As you're young, you know that it's wrong,
mm-hmm.
but when advantages come that only your race can deal with, or where you might have an advantage over somebody else, you might go that way and step on somebody's toes, or as you get older, things change, and your feelings change, and all kinds of things change. We just don't. First of all, let me say this, and I hope I don't step, and I'm sure I will step on toes, but I think religion, and this goes across the board, I'm not talking about any one specific religion. I think religion has done more harm than almost anything else. And it's condoned slavery, it's condoned racism, it's condoned everything, killing. It's been over 2,000 years, and it's not working.
Yeah, and it's also it's condoned those things, and it's also made it very clear what is not acceptable as well. And it's,
right, but you don't need a religion to do that. You can do good
agree.
Without a religion. Why should I need a religion? This is what I mean, human beings. A human being just naturally does good things. They don't need a religion.
Right, but there are, and I am totally on the same page as you. I'm just from a psychological point of view, I would say that there are a lot of people that grow up not having a real inner core, a value system, and they latch onto something and they say, "Oh, this feels right, so I'm going to just be a follower. I'll be a follower of the herd, as opposed to somebody who's going to follow their own true, like you said, their own human feelings." And they become locked into something that is extremely rigid and extremely fundamentalist, and it doesn't lead to anything progressive or forward or evolutionary, really. It takes you backward.
Yeah. I use common sense. I try to use common sense. And for me, if it takes me 2,000 years to learn that something doesn't work, then the problem is mine.
That's a whole lot of wasted time.
You know what I'm saying? It was supposed to be a good thing. And not that it isn't in a lot of respects. It is a good thing. Like I say, everything has pros and cons. But we need another system to teach people how to be human beings. That's what religion, I thought, was supposed to be doing, but it's not working. So we need something else, I don't know.
I think
But humans,
go ahead.
They disappoint me. Human beings disappoint me.
I want to go back to
I say human animals, rather. Human beings don't disappoint me. Human animals disappoint me.
And I just want to be clear, we're not. There are some human animals that have evolved more than others. I think is that we're not all. There are beings out there.
Oh yeah. Sure there are, but most of the time they get killed.
Right. They're they get killed by the savages. I wanted to go back to this, and I don't want to mispronounce this. The N2 troop? N2 troop, because I looked up the definition. It means unity in all things, time and space, living and dead, seen and unseen.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to talk to you about that troop, or the gentlemen and women that were involved in the musical collaboration during that time. For instance, with Harlem Bush music, could you explain, and Taifa? Could you explain to my audience what these titles mean?
Well, Taifa is my oldest daughter.
And it just in general, like Harlem Bush music, for instance, what did that title mean to you, and how did they reflect where you were in your life at that time?
Well, I kind of grew up in Harlem, in New York. I spent most of my probably 20, 25 years living in Harlem. And I wanted a band. Actually, this particular band, we were addressing the black community. That was a band for, I hope everybody loved the music. I wanted everybody to love it, but it was really messages to the black community. And I wanted a band that we could perform anywhere, out in the jungle, in the bush, so that we didn't have a piano. We didn't have any instruments that you couldn't take with you. So that was, and troop, the troop was actually everybody, anybody that enjoyed the music and came to see us, because we encouraged people to bring the instruments and bring, percussion instruments and join in, and sing along with us, and, it was like that.
What was the message to the black community? We are all one, come together, and let's all just, and let's all play and be together and be versatile?
No, there were many messages. There were many messages. Like there was what did we do? We did the Viet Cong. That was a protest against the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
When a lot of our young black young men were being sent over to die somewhere when we still had problems here. If you're gonna go that way, it's funny. Like even religion, they teach you thou shalt not kill when you're young. And then when you become 18, they say, okay, now we want you in the service. We're going to teach you how to kill.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is a paradox. It's no wonder we're a planet full of nuts, because racism is a form of insanity. That in itself is a form of insanity. When you can look at a skin and make up a whole story about a person, that's insane. I can't do that about anybody.
Or look at a name,
and
just sort of salivate about just sort of pontificate about the just sort of absolutely ridiculous tribal stuff, the analogies that are being made to to Obama, for instance, and things like that. I mean, being a 33-year-old guy, I love Barack Obama. I'm a big fan of his. And I think that it's fair. And people often say, well, you can disagree on policy, but we should avoid these more tribal issues like his name and his birth certificate. But over and over again, I've been saying it on my show, even before I started to interview guys like yourself, this is all a smokescreen. This is just a
distraction.
A distraction, because there's really a large segment of older America, white older America, who does not, and this is my opinion, but they don't want to accept. They look at the younger generation. They see multi-ethnic. They see a huge amount of immigration. They see all this multi-ethnicity. They don't recognize it as what the America they grew up in, and they are resentful of that, and they're angry at that, and therefore they're coming up with these, like you said, this insane sort of methodology where we have to tear down one of our own. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Because they think they're going to lose something.
There's insecurity.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Insecure. I mean, they've already had such a head start, but they're still insecure.
They're just it's just amazing.
Like if I had somebody working for me for in my band, I had to, I worked 20 years and I didn't have to pay them, and I'm getting paid wow, that's a nice thing. And they had 400 years.
Can I ask you, Gary, we have...
it's still going on. It's just under other names. But go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, this is compelling. I could talk about it for hours with you. I did wanted to ask you something about the black community. Now, I one of the first albums I had, I believe it was Libra, and on the back cover...
It was called, what was it called?
Libra. It was one of your album from '67 on Milestone.
My first album.
Yes, yeah. And on the back cover, there's this. It stood out as clear as day. It was a picture of Charles Tolliver, and he's looking dapper. He's in a suit, and his hair is really, really groomed. He has a nice afro, and Albert Daly looks really good. And I look at it, and I'm like, boy, style and class. Style was extremely important in the music community at that time, and I look at the black community now and white community as well that emulates this sort of hip hop generation with these. It just seems to me it's just not nearly as classy. There was an element of sophistication at that time that is lacking, and I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on that.
Well.
I just don't see any Charles Tollivers in those suits on these albums anymore. I see a lot of gold bling bling, and I see a lot of denigration I see a lot of weird messages. I don't see love, and I don't really hear music.
Well, I don't hear music a lot of times, but a lot of the music that you don't hear is the music you should hear.
Exactly.
Because there are young musicians really making good music. in the hip-hop community, in all the community. But the hip-hop community is the music of today. That's contemporary. And that's, you know, like, for instance, Billie Holiday would not go out of her home without being dressed. She, you know, Diane Carroll had to makeup, everything. You know, a lot of people, that's a certain generation, that's a certain mindset. Some people were different, you know. Some people more what they used to call bohemian, and you know, Miles set a style. You know, he set certain style, the way he dressed, and people emulated him. Train was not a great dresser, you know, but his music transcended clothes because it's not really about clothes. It's about the art of it. You know, Beethoven didn't necessarily dress good all the time. They say he would be disheveled, but that didn't stop him from being a great musician. So I don't know. I don't worry about those kind of things. Let the young people dress the way they want to.
It was
I dress the way I wanted to. Let them dress the way they want to. I mean, it's a lot of brainwashing, and when they put these people up as examples and people see it, you know, that's. But I'm not in charge of the media.
No, and that's true. I just, when these pictures come across my you know, my visual radar, there was just an element. There was a real element of seriousness, and you guys were being repressed. That was at the height of the civil rights movement. I mean, there was more racial tension at that time than ever before, and maybe it's been dampened down now by our media structure, but it wasn't like you guys were, that you held your heads high, and you were playing music, and you were doing it in a dignified fashion. And I you know, at least, and I don't know if that was really mainstream music at that time in America. That's really maybe that's.
No, it wasn't. It was not mainstream,
right?
You know, but I mean, it's like when I used to go to see the Dells and James Brown and Marvin Gaye and the Impressions. They all dressed up. We're entertainers. You dress up. You don't go to do a show dressed the same way you walk around in the streets. This is something special. People paid to come to see you. People paid. They dressed up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? People dress up. I'm going out. I'm going to see Bartz tonight. You know, and I'm going to dress up too because they're coming to see me. What I'm going to come in with jeans on and hanging out. You know, but I mean that's what the young kids do. So the people that go see them dress like them.
Well, you had flash though, my friend. I mean, there's no doubt. The album the second album I ever owned was the one album you made on Catalyst called Juju Man.
Oh yeah.
And you're wearing a shirt with a frog on it. I mean, you were looking great. I mean, the whole you guys were. It was just footloose and fancy free. People were not. You guys weren't uptight, that's for sure. And whoever was producing those sessions just said, these guys know what they're doing. I'm going to get out of their way and let them have fun. And I'm not going to micromanage so much.
Well, but see, that's a thing. That goes into another subject, that the record industry and why the record industry has failed.
I know we need to talk about that too, and I meant it's OYO, right? Own your own record,
right?
And I wanted to, and Garrett, I wanted to just cordially, in sometime later in the summer, when it works for you, I'd like to have you come back because we have a whole lot of other things to talk about.
Okay.
Is that okay if you can do that?
Sure.
I wanted to ask you before you go. My buddy is going to see you at the Blue Note in a couple weeks. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? You're playing with McCoy Tyner or opening for Booker T?
Oh no, is that the thing? I'm not sure.
I didn't want to put you on the spot.
My
buddy said I'm going to see Bartz in a couple weeks.
I know I'm doing the Highline Ballroom in June with Questlove, Christian McBride.
That's it.
Booker T. Yeah, I think that's at the Highline. It's for the Blue Note Jazz Festival.
Well, that's fantastic.
Actually, not even Jazz Festival, for the Blue Note Festival.
Yeah, let's be clear. It's all music, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're celebrating, I think, their 30th year and 30th anniversary. So they have a month-long series of shows every night in different venues around New York City.
So tell me the venue, the Highline Ballroom.
The Highline Ballroom.
The Highline Ballroom, and for the audience's sake, will you be playing with all different types? Will you get up with Booker T and play with him, or is it going to be kind of a free moving thing, or you do have your own group?
We're all playing together. I think we're all going to play together. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds
we
great.
might be featured. We haven't rehearsed yet, but I'm pretty sure we'll do it like that because Questlove and Christian and I have been talking about doing something anyway.
Well, my friend might come to you with a Jake Feinberg Show T-shirt for a signature, if that's okay.
Tell him to bring me one.
I will. Hey, listen, Gare, I want to tell you, I want to tell you what an honor and a pleasure it was. This is a start of a conversation with you, and I look forward to doing it with you again, my friend.
Okay, I enjoyed it.
Have a great day. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Send them shine.